Right, we're sitting here. I've got Gavin Kelly, the CEO of the Road Freight Association, also sitting in his very nice office there. You can see those are new paintings you've got there behind you, Gavin. I didn't see them in your office before. You obviously doing nothing at home.
Oh, that's right. I'm sitting at home, man. The new office of the day.
Yeah, for sure. The reason we're talking to Gavin Kelly is because the Road Freight Association, in my opinion, has done the most superb job in leading us through this crisis of COVID-19. In the past week, it's been, I think we're on our 12th day of lockdown now. In the past week or past 12 days, there's been almost an entire restructuring of the industry, of the border posts, of the ports, of everything. There's been huge confusion. Gavin, I'll just go back to the Wednesday before the lockdown, which happened on the Thursday night at 12. The regulations only came out late on that afternoon on Wednesday. That was followed by the Minister of Transport speech, which lacked a lot of detail, gave generalization, but no detail. It didn't really help us. And then later that night came the directive from the Department of Trade and Industries that everybody has to register. Given that must have been an horrendous start to what the industry was facing. How did you handle that? How did you get that out?
Well, I think, Patrick, one of our biggest problems was that, this just happened. There seemed to have been no real thought or planning, and at no stage did anyone sit down with us and say, listen, guys, this is what we're planning on doing. We're going to lock down the country. But obviously that means some things still have to happen. So freight's still got to move. And have you guys got any suggestions on how we're going to do this? So we heard it was going to be a lockdown. Nobody had circulated any sort of idea that you'd have to fill in forms. And everyone, governments love forms, man. So you'd have to fill in a form, and then all of a sudden, no, but first you must register with somebody else and prove that you are who you say you are and that you actually are essential. And even the whole categorization of essential goods, how did they get to that? Was that and then you would have seen that as we went along, they went, oh, yes, yeah, that's supposed to be with that. Yeah, oh, that's also supposed to be with it. So, man, the first couple of days, I don't think anyone in the logistics industry slept. And I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about anybody who actually wanted to try and deliver stuff that we needed to get out there, from food to oxygen to fuel. If you really wanted to do what you needed to do, man, those first 48 hours were incredible. It was like trying to get tickets to a baseball match, one of, on Mars. It was just incredible. I'm sure you saw all the comments about the CIPC site coming online, and then everyone got this message. We can't deal with this now.
Yeah. Yes, Gavin, very much so. I was, I didn't go out as much in the past week, in fact, because it was overwhelming. I was following the RFA sites. I was getting my own information, and it was changing, and it was confusing, and it was tons of operators. How many operators are we looking at in this country? How many trucks are we looking at? Let's say your membership.
Well, we know that if we go to eNatus and we look at the number of trucks that are registered, we've got roughly about 700,000 guys that are above 16 tons. There are about 320,000 that are bigger than that. So what people call the super heavies, but the large guys up to 56 tons. There are about 1.5 million light commercial vehicles running around the so-called Bucky Brigade. So when you add all of that together, you're sort of sitting with about 2.5, 3 million, if you add all the trailers and etc. and what have you, vehicles that are running around. Now, not all of those guys are operating, which is important to understand, that there are guys out there who've got to pay for their vehicles. They've got them on HP, they've got drivers, they're not operating. We have just on 400 corporate members. So what we do is we have a membership. For example, there's some big groups out there, and I'm not going to mention all the names, but you'll understand there are big groups out there. We have a number of guys who are part of them as well, and have a number of operating guys. So how many operators are there in the country? Very good question. The figure kind of sort of dabbles backwards and forwards between about 4,000 and about 6,000. Depends on who is registered at the given point in time. So let's call it. There's 4,500 odd operators out there who are registered as commercial operators, and that's the type of numbers of industry that we're looking at this stage.
So we had less than 24 hours to get all those numbers tapped into a system. One, to decide if they qualify for essential goods. Two, to find out what the permit system is and how to comply with the right rules and regulations as were only issued the day before. But Gavin, in defense of the government, may I put this forward, is that it has been a huge crisis. It's been an urgent crisis. You weren't consulted on what, and I think it should have been consulted on that. It was quite a massive overnight crisis. But what I've picked up is that since then, you have been making representation to the government. And have they now been listening to you, Gavin? Have they been taken? That initial 24 hours was absolute chaos. I do take your point that they should have consulted you before on what is essential, what is the transport industry's function in this lockdown. They didn't do that. Mistake, but we learned from those mistakes in this crisis. Since then, have things improved with your negotiations with government in pointing out the flaws as it's gone along?
Patrick, things have got better. And remember that we are part of a link of a massive logistics chain. And some of those links in that chain are in China or in the UK or in the US. And that chain has started to move. It's like a continuous chain that works, started to move weeks before the lockdown happened and will continue to carry on moving after the day one of the lockdown. So there were a number of things that, let's be quite honest, a number of us, even in the logistics chain, hadn't actually quite thought through. And it's only once you start putting spokes or spanners into the works, as it would be, or you look at the spokes of the cog that moves this chain, that you begin to pick up that you can't just pull essential goods out of this whole chain. So yes, I hear what you're saying in terms of it was a massive thing, but I think we as a country could have probably have planned it better. But yes, they have been listening. A couple of things have changed. There's still a couple of standard operating things that we need to get sorted out. For example, the one that's still not sorted out is how many guys are we allowed in the cab of a vehicle? And as you'll know, certain operations require more than just the driver. There's a guy or two with the driver who either operate equipment or in terms of OSH standards or SAN standards or equipment operation need to be there with the driver because that's the function that they perform. So we haven't got that clarified. So we have trucks being turned around, sent back to the depot because there's 2 guys in the cab or 3 guys in the cab, depending on what the needs of that operation is. Then, of course, the little form that went out with the regulations gives an indication of what should be in the form, not the format of the form. So now we have guys being sent back, because your form doesn't look like this and it doesn't have a block there or it doesn't have this in there. All the information is there, but it doesn't look like the one that I would like to see. So that's been a major problem in sorting out, and we've got it sorted out in 1 or 2 authorities, but it's still a problem.
Given I've seen that, what my impression was that the law enforcement officers who were out on the street, they were the last to receive any information. There were even things like you need a disc on a truck to operate. So it seemed like then they were the tail end of this, and yet they were the enforcers, but they weren't given the information, and that's a huge. I know there was one form where the police were insisting and stopping the truck driver, saying it has to be signed by the local police station. Nothing in the regulations about that. So there were a lot of hiccups there, weren't there?
There were. I mean, we had 2 provincial departments who were tapping into our feeds to get the updates to understand what was happening. We had one fellow phone us and said, the only place he can find information, he was given no information whatsoever. The only place he can find, first of all, what the form actually needs to contain, be it as it may. And secondly, some advice. You'll recall we were putting out guidelines of how to read the regulations simply. This is what you need. This is when you need it. And this is where you go and get it. They were using that from a government department point of view to try and guide their own workings because they had not got information. So really, there was really panic in those first 48 hours.
Yeah, I remember receiving a call from the RTMC on breathalyzers, with the at depots, when trucks go into depots, normally like the oil companies and many companies, you have to blow into a breathalyzer. Should they continue those or not, and that was the RTMC. But yeah, we've got to sort it out. But Gavin, where were the main problem areas? Let's look at three. We've got, okay, your essential good deliveries around towns, long haul between Cape Town and Joburg, and then the distribution around towns to the stores that are allowed to be open. You've got border posts, and you had a big problems with ports that I still think, from what I've picked up, and by the way, I picked up a lot from RFA website, so thank you for that, from all your notifications. And that simplification of regulations was so helpful to the industry, Gavin, so well done to you and your team on that. But the ports, I think, is still a problem on what is essential goods and not, or has that just been resolved? I think it might have been today, but over to you.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks for the kind words. And I think the important thing is that we try to make it understandable or workable for everybody. So thank you very much for those kind words. Let's deal with those three issues that you raised, and let's go to the easiest one first, I suppose, which is the ports. So you'll recall the original regulations spoke about only moving essential goods, and those essential goods were categorized into four, maybe five if you would, but four very broad categories. So it was food, obviously. Then it was all the medical type stuff. And I'm saying type of stuff. I don't want to go into pills and say medical type stuff, and all the equipment related to that. Then we had fuel, which was, your petroleum style products. And then you had coal and gold, that type of idea. So those were the sort of the four broad categories. Made a lot of sense in that sentence, but once you began to unpack that, there were things that were allied to those four broad categories that then began to create problems. Because once you went down to the services, the essential services, for example, one of the essential services dealt with the packaging of the medicines and the medical type stuff. So somebody would need to send tablets somewhere, but you have to put the tablets in a box or in a plastic bag. Somebody has to make those. So therefore, that whole process of supporting getting the tablets to a chemist or to somebody required that essential service of packaging to be declared. So that's why I'm saying that in those first couple of hours, it was very difficult to work out exactly what was essential and what wasn't. And you know what? It's easy to blame the officers on the road. But there were a number of guys there, I'm sure, who were scratching their heads saying, well, this is paper, it's paper. So very, very difficult. So that was the first real challenge, was understanding how all of this fitted together, which is why I'm saying that the cogs in this chain, you only began to now realize how things work together. Then it's distributing this. How do you, if it's a lockdown, then surely things must stop. But you've got to get goods, essential goods, from where they're manufactured to where they're packaged, and from where they're packaged, if it's not the same thing, to the distribution centers and then out to the retail stores. So getting something to your local corner store, how do you get it there and through who does it pass? And are all of these guys legit? And then there's some of the stuff on these vehicles that isn't essential. You must remember that a lot of cargo was moving before day one of the lockdown. And you couldn't suddenly en route now unpack a truck and leave the non-essential stuff on the side of the road. And I'm being facetious now. You couldn't do that.
Yeah.
For the first couple of days, you had non-essential vehicles or non-essential vehicles, goods that were not essential, were traveling because they were in between distribution and drop-off points. So there was a huge headache. And getting the empty vehicles back now, especially those who traveled long distance, so they might have left Cape Town, gone all the way up to Limpopo, and now we're heading back. You can't just drop that vehicle on the side of the road at 12 o'clock on Thursday night and say, well, that's it. Tough tacky, pal. Maybe in 31 days when you get back, you might see the indentations of where all the wheels were. But apart from anything else, you ain't going to find nothing. So that was a problem.
Right.
The ports, First of all, only essential goods through the ports. It sounded cool. It sounded like the right thing to do. We want to just get food through and out. We just want to get the medical stuff in and out. But all the other boxes carried on coming. And generally, containers is what everyone uses these days. And we picked up two problems. And we have a lot of partners in this. It isn't only the RFA. It's also the forwarding agents, the clearing agents, the merchants who are saying, you know, we don't have a box that's just food and a box that's just medical stuff. When we buy stuff from wherever in the world, we might buy, you know, guavas from them, and at the same time we'll buy socks, and we'll buy a couple of pulls, and we'll have a couple of TVs, or whatever the case may be, and we fill the box. So it was the first thing that we realized was that a lot of these containers that had come in were mixed goods. And I've probably used the wrong example of putting food and electronics together, but you get the idea. These boxes weren't all just essential.
Right.
So what do? We need to take them, and then we need to unpack them, and we've just sent everybody home.
Right.
So that's the issue. And then, of course, there were a lot of non-essential boxes. And these boxes got to the quayside, for want of a better word, off the ship, onto the quayside, and boom. And they started to choke the port. So you're quite right. In the last 24 hours, about 2 days ago, we managed to get through a change in the regulations that allows us to move all of the boxes out of the port, whether they're essential or not, whether they're mixed or not, whether they're only non-essential goods or not. We have to. Otherwise, those ports will become chocked, locked up, and of course, we then can't export. And no matter how much we lock down, there are certain things that have to move. We've got agreements with our neighboring countries of moving stuff to them. And what we deem essential is not necessarily what the country next door deems essential. So those ports have to remain in operation. We have to make sure the essential stuff does come through the ports. So we have to clear the quayside, for want of a better word. And there's a better word for it, but let's just say the quayside.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Boxes, then containers we call boxes, all need to get out of that port so that the port can keep operating. So that was a big change, a big win, not for the RFA per se, but for the economy, for the industry, and for making sure that trade keeps on moving. So those boxes now move to warehouses and depots. They're not allowed to be unpacked. Right. So the borders, man.
Yeah, that was a big problem. That's bad because, Gavin, if I may intervene there, on top of our own lockdown, we had following a lockdown in Zimbabwe. Then Zambia, there were big problems on the Zambia border. There's still a massive problem between Zambia and DRC. And then Botswana came in with regulations. So, and still when we didn't, I remember at one stage where the Beitbridge was fully blocked. I think it was the first day of lockdown. And the Minister of Home Affairs went up there and said, look, they were only letting essential goods through. And so they were having to check all that. And there was a massive pile up there. And he actually put the rule in, said, let all goods vehicles go through on that day. I don't know if that's still applying at the moment. You know, regulations have been chopped and changed. You up to date with it. Yeah, what was the problem there, Gavin? And what are we looking at today now on the way forward? Remember, with border pipes?
Yeah, there was this utopian view that we'd only let essential goods through.
Yeah.
And it sounded good and it sounded right. And it's been a learning curve for everybody. It's very easy, as you said right in the beginning, to point a finger at government. I mean, this is, you know, virgin territory for everybody. It just hasn't happened to
absolutely,
to me.
Absolutely.
So, you know, and I've said a couple of times to guys, how many movies have we seen about this? This is easy, man. You know, just drop the door, close the door. But you can't do that. So the first thing is that, and I said it earlier on, my essential goods isn't necessarily your essential goods. Yes. For the country. Let's take an example, Zimbabwe. So what we're saying in South Africa was essential goods, those 4 categories, easy done, hot ones. Zimbabwe is saying, but guys, we need the following things to continue to survive. We all know in what state that country is. And every country has its own essentials. So the first thing that happened was the trucks keep moving to the border, obviously, and now you start letting through only the essential goods as we deemed essential. So the trucks began to build up. And suddenly, when there were stories of 40-kilometer backlogs of trucks, not necessarily at Bike Bridge. I think the longest it got to was roughly about 20 before the minister got involved, and with 20 is still long.
That's long.
But there are stories of 40-kilometer queues of trucks trying to get through. And what is this lockdown about? It's supposed to be about minimizing the amount of contact between people. I mean, trucks is fine. As far as we know, they don't contract the virus right now. So that was the first challenge, was that all of a sudden we disrupted the normal flow of freight, of anything through border, people as well. And that had to be resolved. So the minister went up there and said, no, chaps, we can't have trucks just standing here. People sitting next to the side of the border with no reasonable chance of moving either home or out, because once you jump out of that queue, that's it. So they cleared those borders about a week ago. They got everything moving through. It was just a case of, guys, we'll put you through screening, we'll put you through sanitization and get you through. And really, that's where we are generally trying to get everyone through the borders. Those goods that are not essential, some border posts have been halted and said, you're not going through. So this is a whole lot of TVs. Sorry, it's not essential. The problem is the humanitarian aspect of those drivers sitting there. You have other countries who've post our lockdown, obviously, and you must jump in, Patrick, if you want to ask me something. I'm just doing what you did, Dash, the other day. I can hear you going, I'm going. Obviously, post our lockdown, other countries have come in with their lockdown rules, and you've kind of got two gates at a border now, and this gate's key isn't necessarily the same as this gate's key.
Yeah, that's been a big problem, hasn't it? That was an added problem when they had their own lockdowns and their regs, and we're trying to. I see most of the countries almost adopted our regulations. I've looked at the Botswana regulations. I've looked at some others. They almost copied our regulations with slight alterations.
Yeah. There's some standardization happening now. That's also been going on in the background. I think the biggest problem is that a couple of the countries, Zambia being one of them, has implemented a quarantine. So any driver coming in from somewhere else into 21 days or 14 days of quarantine, depending on where he's come from, boom, that's it.
Gavin, have you had anyone inspect that quarantine area? Because I've heard it's in the middle of the bush, no facilities or anything, which is not good for the drivers.
We have got some guys up there. There's the Zambian equivalent of the RFA, the Hauliers Association up there. We've asked them to go have a look. We've tried through customs. The tough part, Patrick, is that it's a sovereign country, and who are we? Even though we're trying to get them to understand that you need basic facilities and you need basic hygiene and you've got to look after these people, it's very difficult. It's not as if it's down the road and we could, put a truck together with stuff and go up to warm baths or something like that.
Yeah, I got you. Surely then somebody like a cross-border road transit agency that has very strong connections with their counterparts cross-border should be intervening if word is coming out, as it is, that these guys' condition is not good. COVID is all about cleanliness and sanitization and all that. These guys are living together in the veld, and have they stepped into the breach there, Gavin?
Well, they're on all the WhatsApp chats. This is one of the wonderful things about COVID is, boy, I'm a member of so many WhatsApp groups, and I can see they're on those groups, and I can see that they are, I'll tell you, I can see that they are getting the information. But I think, with all due respect to the CBRTA in South Africa, their hands are also reasonably tied. They can't just jump in. They have been talking to their counterparts, but I think we haven't seen the action and the change that we really want. That's the reality.
Okay, good. That change must come. We can't leave those drivers in that type of conditions. Gavin, just to consolidate, or not consolidate, the complexity of the industry and the vitality and the vitalness of the industry to the South African and the regional economy, in my opinion, has never been recognized by any government. And I'm going back to the Nationalist Party government, by anyone there. Now, you weren't consulted beforehand, so it tells me again that the trucking industry sucked the hindsets in all this, okay? And it shouldn't be. I'm hoping that when this is over, that the trucking industry will now take its rightful place of importance in the economy. It has never been recognized. And that brings truck drivers. We were just talking about the guys in Zambia. Truck drivers, if the operators or if the industry as a whole is not really recognized, and I'll stand by that, and I'll argue with any government minister on that. We've had 9, or is it 10, ministers of transport since 1994, for goodness sake. I'm hoping that the industry will be recognized for its true role, and the government will take more note of it. As you say, the supply chain goes right back to overseas ships, containers on ships, ports, deliveries to things. The industry needs to be recognized for the critical role. And I think this might be a catalyst towards that. What's your opinion?
Patrick, yeah, what you're saying is correct. But I think we are our own worst enemy. Because you know why? And this is a very good example. We step up to the plate and we get things done and we make a plan. And a trucker has always been like that. A logistics operator looks at the challenges and makes it work. And quite often, the government, when it makes decisions, seems to think, well, don't worry, you know, the road freight boys will sort it out and get it working and make suggestions, come up with proposals, as the case may be. I definitely hope that we will be looked at in a different light, that they understand. And this is not because we want to take anything away from rail. That's not what it's about.
No.
This is about ensuring that we actually get the goods to the customer. And if the rail leg is the better leg, the cheaper leg, the more environmentally friendly leg, I can tell you now, all logistics providers will use it, but there is no rail to speak about. This is about the commodity to the customer, and the customer is the one who decides how it's going to go, because that's the person who pays the price. But I sincerely hope that we are recognized, that truck drivers are recognized for the role they're playing. And we are going to start a program starting on Monday, where we want to make sure that the general public understand the role of a truck driver in their life, that everything that they have to survive has been supplied by somebody who's working while they are in lockdown, which is an important concept. The other thing is to understand the role that transport does bring into the economy. Yes, maybe there are some emissions and there is new technology to deal with that. But once again, a truck requires lots of other ancillary industries to keep it going. So there are many, many jobs, many, many industries, many, many vocations that have arisen and are driven because of road transport.
Absolutely, Gavin. And when I say the government has not recognized, nor has the man in the street, we will be fully supportive of your campaign, by the way. Whatever help you need on that, please just give us a shot. Gavin, last thought. I spoke to an operator the other day, delivers fuel, runs tankers. He's got 90% of his business is down because there's no cars on the road, so there's no demand for fuel. What has the impact been? I mean, a lot of trucks are running, but what people don't realize, a lot of trucks aren't running, and a huge number of trucks are not running. Some operators don't carry essential goods at all, so their whole fleet is parked. What is the overall impact of this, in your opinion? I'm sure you don't have the exact figures now, on the truck operators out there and on drivers.
Well, I think, Patrick, you've probably answered it in your own question. So you will have operators who might only right now have been affected by having lost 20% of their business. So they're running at 75, 80%, and for them, not too bad. But of course, as demand starts to taper off, they'll have a problem. Right to the other side of the spectrum, where we've got operators who are not operating at all. Nothing, nada. They are not generating a single cent. And then, you know, in between all of that, if you sort of took an average and now you took the 80% to the nothing and you worked out an average, which is not the right way to do it. But definitely, if you look at the figures that are on the toll roads, now I'm stuttering, sorry. Look at the figures on the toll roads. So spoken to the N3, we spoke to the N4, the N1. You look at the physical vehicles traveling through the toll gates. That has dropped by 75%.
Yes, I heard that.
The sort of long leg, the long haul logistics that is started to reduce. And of course, you can see, you know, in your daily travel, well, you're not daily travels. If you're looking at any of the of the electronic media around and seeing what's traveling around in the cities, you see it's down to the bare minimum. So we definitely, at least 75% of freight movement has come to a halt. And there are a lot of operators out there, not just big operators. We're talking about owner drivers, we're talking about micro operators who are not moving a single thing. Those trucks are not moving. And you and I both know if the wheels are not turning, it's not going to make it.
Income is not going to make it, yeah. Gavin, just to lead on from that, the drivers who are off at home now because there's no trucks to drive. I believe the National Bargaining Council, I know there's a UIF, the government has prompted that UIF payment scheme. And I know you've been negotiating with the National Bargaining Council. I'll be speaking to Musa tomorrow on some kind of a deal with leave pay so that the drivers, you're trying to minimize the suffering of drivers. Any details on that?
Well, look, we managed to organize a deal. Sounds terrible. We managed to put in place. You don't want to use the term deal because that's although it is a deal, we've put in place a process where leave pay can be advanced, so that, as you will know, all operators who are members of the council need to pay their leave amounts into the council. The council disperses that. We put that in place a couple of years ago to ensure that drivers were looked after in terms of when they went on leave, and that their leave money didn't disappear down some dark and deep hole. So what we've said is there's money available at council for that over this period that the drivers get paid their salary out of that leave proportionment or apportionment of that leave money, so that they can still earn. Because as soon as you don't have money coming in, you then can't buy sanitizer, you can't get water and what have you. So hopefully they lessen it. The problem is, and I'm not chasing any ghosts here, Patrick. The problem is, if this goes past, the 14th, 15th, 16th of April, whichever the date might be, the date's not important, and it becomes a longer lockdown, how are we going to look after our drivers?
Yeah. And our operators are going to go down. So, Gavin, as I see it, there's been an administrative challenge, there's been an operational challenges, and so there's been really great successes there. But the industry has also been hit tragically hard, just as all sectors have, but perhaps even more so, because they've been hit hard. And the drivers, of course, have been hit very hard. I know a lot of companies I've spoken to are paying their drivers as much as they can, but how long will that last, they say, while their income is not there. You hit the nail on the head. Gavin, on behalf of FleetWatch, thank you so much for this interview, giving us your time. I know you've been spending long hours. I've been watching you late at night. I've even phoned you late at night. We've been swapping information, and you guys have done the most wonderful job. Gavin, if I may say, I've said it last night on the radio, this is the RFA we've been looking for years, my friend. As you know, my opinion, I think the RFA is a bit of a limp wrist in the past. Will be hit for that, I know, but that's my opinion. It has represented the interests of the big guys. I hope this brings the unity of the industry together under one umbrella body, because there are other challenges that are still out there, not related to COVID, such as trucker tax, foreign drivers, etc. And we need central unity when the industry is negotiating on that part and trying to solve those problems. And on behalf of the whole of South Africa, I want to thank you, the RFA, and all those association bodies that have input into you, the freight forwarders, etc., for keeping the wheels of this country going. In probably one of the worst things, well, it's been described all over the world as the worst since World War II, the worst since, it's awful. But the wheels of the economy are running thanks to the trucking industry, and to all of your truck operators out there, all your members and people who aren't members, who have also relied on you, by the way, which is very nice. And all the truck drivers. The trucking industry, in my opinion, is the unsung hero of the economy. And I hope it now becomes a sung hero. Hollard Highway Heroes. That's a project implemented by Hollard Trucking, the insurance company. They call it Highway Heroes. And now,
we know it well.
Yeah, I know you part of it. And I'm just saying, for those who don't know it, now I hope South Africa realizes just how many heroes there are in this trucking industry. Gavin, thank you very much. Yeah, a last word from you.
Last word from me. We're here for all. We're not just here for big operators. And if that perception's out there, we need to fix that perception. You know, the difference between this and World War II or World War I was that logistics still ran in the wars. Here, it's not running. And that's what we've got to look after. Otherwise, we're going to lose a lot of our businesses and of our operators.
Gavin, on that point, on that very vital point, I thank you once again. God bless you.